Mr. David Creighton, what's going on?
Oh, nice to be back. Oh, Nico, I tell you, it's been a hell of a week. Working hard to keep 399 ostriches alive. And with that, the hope that we still have some freedom and property rights in this country. Because I'm sure you've been following the Universal Ostrich Farm story. And I got a note late Saturday night, early Sunday morning, that there was a so-called task force en route to the farm in Edgewood, British Columbia, to kill all the birds. And this has been confirmed throughout the week. It's approximately 200 RCMP, 200 RCMP going to a farm to kill.
Are you serious?
This is just outrageous. And with everything else going on with criminal justice in this country, you know, with these home invasions and the cops don't give a damn, and we got 200 RCMP officers tasked to kill perfectly healthy birds. And this is all about putting farmers in their place, taking livestock and killing it, invading people's property. So, you know, I was noting today that we've got two kinds of thugs in this country now. We've got the thugs that come into your home, invade your home, steal your property, threaten your life and that of their family. And we've got government thugs who invade your property and steal your property, steal your livelihood, steal your livestock, and kill it. And I am so mad about this. You know, I got Katie Passatnay. She's the daughter of the farm's owners on Redacted today. I called up or contacted Clayton Morris and said, you know, can you possibly get Katie on the show? And he got her on today and gave her about 25 minutes to talk about things. And we're hoping that it gets even bigger with other appearances, because the only thing that's going to stop this is American intervention.
Yep.
And Bobby Kennedy's already intervened once. He did twice.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
We've got people like Dr. Oz, and there's interest from Joe Rogan, and Elon Musk is following this. So I'm hoping we get some direct intervention from the U.S. on this, because if this goes through, this is another Freedom Convoy story, because it's all 100%. About intimidating the little people, you know. And that's certainly not an aspersion against his family. I love these people, and I would do anything for these people at this point, because I just see them as victims of government oppression, not just overreach, but oppression. But it's all about the government putting farmers in their place and putting people in their place who don't agree with them. It's a narco tyranny again. Here we go. It's the same thing as what happened to
same
Chris
thing.
Barber.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. The point that Bobby Kennedy got involved, the point that Oz offered to pay everything to put him on his ranch in Florida, saying not only does he want to take them, but he's like, we need to study them. Japan has studied them already, and you know that something's going on for them to want to get rid of 399 ostriches that probably, most possibly, have natural immunity to the avian flu. Which, tell me why we wouldn't study them. Tell me why we wouldn't reproduce them. Tell me why we wouldn't want to duplicate how they got that immunity. You cannot, I don't think at this point it's a conspiracy to say that there's something going on. The government is doing the bidding of Big Pharma because there's no money to be made in free immunity. There's no money there. So you know that there's something going on, whatever it is, there's something going on, and there's no reasons for them to get rid of them. And not only that, but I was seeing some report this week saying that the farms in the area are complaining and are scared that their own livestock will get infected. And I'm like, you know what? Sorry, David, but fuck off. This has been going on since December last year. Don't give me this. Don't give me this.
If the CBC put out a hit piece last weekend, it was under the guise of a fact check. It was just a piece of crap. I critiqued it myself along with David Freiheit, otherwise known as Aviva Fry. We sort of teamed up with The Weekend, and we had Katie on the show, and we said, this is a piece of nonsense. and there's nothing here except two so-called subject matter experts who really didn't offer very much. And of course, it's about natural immunity is not on the table for this government. It's get a vaccine or kill them. So the more birds you kill, and of course they've killed 8 million chickens in British Columbia, pushing up the price of poultry, pushing up the price of eggs. And the goal here, of course, is so we don't eat chickens anymore. We don't eat poultry, and beef will be next. And we'll start culling the beef herds, and we'll be left with what? The insects that the World
Yep.
Economic Forum wants us to eat. I mean, it sounds horrible. I said that can't be what's happening. It's happening
It
before our
is.
very eyes.
It
And
is.
they want to put these people in jail or fine them $10,000 a bird for testing them. Why would the government say you can't test them unless they've got something to hide? How stupid do they think Canadians are? And unfortunately, I still get people coming to me saying, I really don't care much about birds or ostriches. Well, I said, do you care about your personal freedom? Do you care about your property rights? Do you care about the
Yep.
fact the government can walk into your home, steal your property,
No.
and kill it?
Nope.
Well, if you don't care about that, then maybe you should wonder why you're living.
But they don't care at the end of the day. When I first read 1984, probably a decade ago or more, I've always wondered how they got to where they are, to the dystopian hell that they are in the book, because they don't talk about it, right? You show up, it's already there. But then the more Canada's going, the more I'm realizing that this is what happened before 1984. This is the precursor that we're seeing right now. What went on with the lockdowns, what went on with the Freedom Convoy, what is going on right now with the call, what's going on with Bill C2 that's trying to be passed, what's going on with Bill C8 that's trying to be passed. You're starting to see, look at what's going on in the UK right now. They're
Oh,
being
yeah.
invaded, and we're being invaded here too. So it's everywhere you look, it's all pointing to the same result. Us in chain, owning nothing, eating bugs, and being happy. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard of this guy. I'm trying to find his name, but I called him the bug guy because I couldn't remember what his name is, but one of our followers told us to speak to him because he went on a diet of 30 days, literally just eating bugs, whatever was available. He got so sick. He got so sick eating it, but yet
Oh,
he also believes that what the WEF, the WHO are doing is exactly that. And he's like, there's a good reason why, as you said, the price of poultry is so high. The price of beef is so high because there's no reason. We're one of the biggest producers on the planet. Why is our beef so expensive? Because did you look? I don't remember the numbers by heart. I can find them. But right now we have less stock heads than like in the 1980s. For some reason, our producers are not producing for some reason.
yeah, for
It's
some
absolutely
reason.
insane. Don't
Yeah.
tell me that this is not on purpose.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the UK. I saw that story this morning too about the British
Yeah,
satirist comedian
yeah.
Graham Linehan. He
IT.
lands in
Yeah,
Heathrow and he gets arrested, strip searched, beaten up basically by the cops, thrown in the hospital, and banned from going on X.
yeah,
This is a police state. And
yep,
this is what's coming for Canada because we're going to
yep.
have our own version of the online. What do they
Bill C
call it over
two,
there?
Bill C
Yeah,
eight.
yeah. It was the Online Harms Act, and the Brits are calling it the Online Safety Act. That's it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, of
So
course,
that's what's coming for
it's
Canada.
catchier.
You say anything the least bit offensive on social media, cops will be knocking at your door, or it's terrible. And this is why I tell people, I spent my whole life praising police forces across Canada. I don't anymore because they're not on my side anymore. They're not on your side. And there's too many woke cops out there who are working for the political agenda of the government. And I think they love this. They love the petty dictatorship, just like the health authorities loved it during COVID. And this is why they want an avian flu outbreak, because they love telling you how to live, putting on a
Yep.
mask. You can't leave your domicile or get a haircut or go to the gym. But hey, strip clubs are open and the bars are.
Yep.
These
You
people
can
are
smoke
crazy.
all the weed you need. You can smoke all the weed you want. You can buy all the alcohol you want, no problem. But I couldn't teach martial art and I couldn't go to the gym. This book, have you read Ordinary Men?
I have not. I know the title, but I have not read it. No.
This book should be taught to police officers. It's basically based on Poland and the military police of Germany, because people don't understand this, but the military comes in, they take over a town, they leave, and then they install military police to enforce the new rule of law. And
Mm.
the book is brilliant, but it was written by a journalist that was trying to look at the psychology of what it took for regular police officers to start rounding up Jews and bring them to the woods and killing them.
Oh
And the
yes,
guy
yes.
explains throughout the book that at the beginning, nobody wanted to do it. Then it takes one person. One person to do it starts calling the other one's name, like, hey, you're a pussy. And then everybody jumps in. And throughout the book, throughout his research, he could not find one single cop that got reprimanded for not doing it. So people just followed orders because they did not want to stand up. And this is what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
I'm seeing the same thing with the police. Like, the psychology behind it is exactly the same in Canada. The
That's,
same happened during COVID. They enforced the law. Oh yeah, but it's my job. Okay, cool. So that means you don't stand up for it. I lost everything over this for not taking a job. I lost my career as a sales engineer, lost everything I worked for 20 years. And you know what? That's my choice, but I stood up for my beliefs. And if you ask me to do it again, I will do it again because I know what I'm made of. But yet I look at the police officers that are supposed to do the same. They're not. There was one, Maxime Ouellet. I don't know if you know the guy, the French guy from Montreal, stood up, talked against it, lost pretty much everything too. But luckily for him, he had investment. He could move over from being a police officer. But there was literally one that stood up and he got dismantled in the news, called an anti-vaxxer, called all the words that you can imagine. But one stood up. One.
I'll have to look up that book because I have read extensively on the Einses group and who are
Yeah.
these death squads that rove throughout Poland, Ukraine, and Belarus, Lithuania, and whatnot, killing hundreds of thousands of Jews and partisans. And yeah, and you're right. And the people that said no, none of them were kicked out because they were basically disobeying an unlawful command.
Mhm.
But people just naturally just joined in the action because they felt like if they didn't, yeah, they would be excluded. And so that's exactly how these things get out of control. And it's a group think, which is
Yep.
why we have to be individuals, not and not thinking constantly like a group. But that, yeah, I have to look that book up. But it scares the hell out of me what's happening right now with this. And yeah, they're just ostriches. But as I said to
But they're
some
not.
folks the
They're
other day,
not.
it's not just ostriches because where's this
They're
going to end? Because the
Mhm.
next time the call could be human beings who
100%.
who are unvaccinated, who refuse to be vaccinated, who just don't accept the narrative, and they're useless to society. We have to get rid of you, and that's of course where we're going with this if we don't stop it now.
And I think the thing I find the most funny, or the funniest about all of this, is if you look at the average person, they think that they would have been the Germans saving the Jews. They would have been the French saving the Jews, the one hiding them in their basements. And COVID taught us that that's not the case at all. The average individual is going to snitch on their neighbor for having too many cars in their parking lot because we weren't allowed to have parties around Christmas. So this is, I don't know what Canadians need to hear in order to wake up. I don't know what it's going to take, but you're absolutely right. The ostriches are not just ostriches. You literally are seeing our biggest allies saying, we will take them. Don't get rid of them. We will take them. We will take care of them. We will bring them over. We will study them because we have something to learn. And Canada's like, yep, nope, sorry, we're going to have to destroy them.
Yeah, but that's anyway. I'm glad we had a chance to talk about this because it's really been on my heart all week, and I've been fighting like mad, doing as much media work as I can to get this message out. And I'm 50-50 right now whether it's going to succeed or not, because the interest is growing in the US right now. And
Yeah.
I know Mark Carney's scared to hell of Donald Trump, and so I think it's a good possibility he might back down quietly over this. So I'm hoping and praying, because to me it's very symbolic. So
That could be,
thanks for letting me talk about it.
oh, absolutely. This is something I've been talking about since the beginning. I've been, I knew something was up from the get go. You have the best subject to study and you choose not to. Why? They won't answer the question. You know something's wrong. We all know why. Come on. We know why. I just want to ask the question why and get an honest answer, but we're not going to get it. But it's a matter of one tweet, right? It's a matter of one Donald Trump tweet. Hey, Carney, because you know that he would tweet at Mark Carney. Why are you not send those ostriches to us now? You know, he's the type of guy that would actually do that. It would go crazy over the world, and then Mark Carney would do what he does best, and he would go elbows up and give the ostriches away, right? So one tweet, we're one tweet away from saving the ostriches.
And I think it's possible. So we'll see.
Yeah. So I think it was this week. I think it might have been on Friday. I posted about the Quebec ban, the Quebec wanting to ban the public prayers, and I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember your comment exactly word for word, but you basically said this is setting a dangerous precedent, or along those lines. What do you mean by that? Because a lot of people are happy to hear about Quebec banning public prayers. I know where you're going with this, but you need to develop the idea. Tell me why you think it's a bad precedent.
Well, I think it's a bad precedent because it's like people who said, "Great, they're throwing Jehovah's Witnesses in concentration camps." Because I don't like Jehovah's Witnesses, and that, that to me is completely contrary to the common sense and freedom of religion. I don't think you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think you can establish parameters about public prayer. No, they shouldn't be blocking traffic, whether you're a Muslim, you're a Christian, or a Jew. You shouldn't be standing in the middle of the street in public prayer. That's what they should be saying. No public prayer in the middle of the street. But when you ban public prayer, it's going to affect everybody that has a faith in God. So every person of faith is affected by this. And people say, good, we're getting those Muslims. And that to me is just absolute crap, because I have many Muslim friends who work with me to stop the LGBTQ agenda. I march with them every year on the Million Person March. We agree on a lot of family values. So I have no truck or trade with people who want to get those Muslims. I do think there's a lot of people involved in these Muslim protests who are going way overboard. I do think a lot of these so-called Muslim marches are actually Antifa marches, because these queers for Palestine who literally shut down the Ottawa Gay Pride Parade because of politics over Palestine. These weren't Muslims. These were Antifa people masquerading as Palestinian supporters. They've been doing this since the war began. But we don't need to attack public prayer. If you want to stop Muslims or anybody from praying in the middle of the street and having protests that are that intrusive, then you can craft the law and the legislation in a more specific manner. You don't have to wipe out public prayer entirely, because Quebec has a tendency to go that route because it's extremely uh, anti-Muslim. It's extremely anti-clerical now. It went from a society that was steeped in Roman Catholicism to a very secular society. And I think that effect has been very anti-religious and very anti-faith in every respect. So I don't want laws that say I can't pray in public. I don't think I should be praying in the middle of a highway. That's just plain stupidity. But once again, I don't like the government telling me when and where I could pray, unless it's about personal safety for myself and others. Then that becomes another issue. But to ban it entirely, is once again government overreach. And I want a government that minds its own business. To quote Pierre Polyev, says that about once a year. If he said it every week, I'd be so happy. But that's the kind of government I want. I don't want the government to use people as scapegoats and to say that, oh, we're going to punish this particular faith, but don't you worry, it's not going to affect you. Of course it will. Just like in Nazi Germany, every faith in that country was affected by the totalitarian edicts. Not just the Jehovah's Witnesses who were thrown in concentration camps. Eventually, Catholic priests were silenced, and Protestants were silenced. Everybody had to toe the party line. But in the beginning, a lot of people said, "Yeah, good, good, go after that group because I'm not part of them, and that's go ahead, put your anger on this group here because then you won't put it on me." But that's always not the case with government. It goes after everybody in the end because it's a aggrandizement of power. That's what government is always about, and that's why I'm basically becoming increasingly anti-government and anti-state the older I get because I don't see it ever doing anything beneficial for people.
So the thing that you and I are going to disagree with here is I'm going to agree with you on the ban. I don't like bans as a whole. Like as a word, I don't like bans. I don't like when the government tells me what I can and cannot do. That being said, why is it that it's okay for them to do that? Because we're not seeing any Christians doing that. I can name at least 5 Christian pastors that simply did street prayers, street prayers as in on the sidewalk by themselves, like 1 or 2 people. They get arrested and they have to spend time and time and time in court to defend what they did. Not one Muslim has that happen, yet Muslims are capable of. I'm in Montreal. It's everywhere. Everywhere. Every weekend, literally, there's a park. There's streets that are being blocked. Bloor and Yonge, too many times to name. Ottawa, like you were just referring to, the protest, the Antifa protest, let's call it that. But everywhere they're capable of doing it, and they're doing it in the UK, they're doing it everywhere in the West. So do you honestly believe, because I think this is where you and I are going to disagree. I do not believe that their values, like if they follow the Quran, works with Western values. It does not work with our values. Like Christians, at the end of the day, we're not going to stop people from having their own religions. Like it's fine, at least for me as a Christian, I really don't care. You want to pray to somebody else, that's on you. You're the one that's going to have to explain yourself to God, not me. So I don't care. As long as you're not impacting my life, my children, I don't really care at the end of the day. But why is it just them that do take advantage of it? Because to me, their behaviors is a show of force. It has nothing to do with prayer. Just here in Montreal, there's more than 100 mosques where they can go. And I'm just talking Montreal. I'm not talking the greater Montreal, but just here in Montreal, there's around 100 mosques that they can go to. So why, as Christians, we don't do that? We know that it's not an okay thing to do. Yet, almost every Sunday now, they show up to the Notre Dame Basilica right here downtown in the old port of Montreal, which is probably the nicest church in Canada, at least the nicest I've seen. And they pray right outside of the walls, like literally on their parking lot every Sunday. And they do it. It has nothing to do with what they believe in. It has nothing to do with their religion. It's not like us going to church on Sundays, right? So time and time again, you see them use it as a show of force. I don't believe in bans. I don't like bans. I don't like bans about anything. I don't like that. But how do you fix what they're doing if we all know? I don't know a lot of people that agree with it personally. Unless you're Muslim, then I don't know. But what do we do to stop them from doing that? Because clearly they're not going to stop if nothing is done. So what can we do to stop it?
Well, like I said, I don't think you have to have a absolute ban on public prayer because obviously we know where this is aimed at. I think you have to insist upon accommodation to the values of the city, the Western values that we have in Canada. And do I
Mhm.
believe Muslims can accommodate themselves to that? Yes, I do. if they accept a separation of mosque and state, as I accept the separation of church and state, because I never want a state religion. I never want the state to tell me how to pray or what to believe in. And the Muslims I'm acquainted with would believe that. And the Muslims I'm acquainted with are not trying to impose Sharia law on Canadians because they see a separation there. They have a there's one thing in the mosque and there's a separate thing in the public square. And I think I can't speak for every Muslim. I have Muslim friends that I work with on these issues because we are in complete agreement in terms of woke politics. And I need the Muslims as my allies in my fight against woke politics and the LGBTQ scourge in this country. That's the enemy for me. I don't see the Muslims as my enemy. I think the Muslims have been hijacked by Antifa in many cases. And at the same time, though, this is a horrible time for a lot of Muslims with family in Palestine or Gaza, in that area, that part of the country. And I have a very good friend here in Ottawa who has family in Lebanon, but he's not out protesting every week, blocking traffic. He's a businessman. He has a normal life, and he works very hard to get the gay pride flag raising ceremony canceled in public schools, and I applaud him for that. And I have completely supported his efforts over that. But this is a hard time, and this is why I said this war in Gaza was meant to divide people of faith all over the world, and especially in Canada, in the US. And as I've said before, I've spent my whole life supporting everything Israel does. I am not supporting what Israel's doing in Gaza right now. And this is an evangelical Christian who spent time at a kibbutz in 1985. This is an evangelical Christian who spent his whole life saying Israel has to do what it must do to maintain its independence. I'm sorry, it doesn't include what's going on in Gaza right now, which I'm ashamed to watch, and I'm very, very disappointed in Israel. That doesn't mean I still don't love the Jewish people and support them in every way, but I do not support the official foreign policy of Israel right now.
You know, I don't. I'm. This is gonna sound harsh, but I don't really care about what's going on overseas because we have so many problems here in Canada. Like I don't. I talk about what's going on in the news, so I will address the Gaza, the Palestine / Israel problems. But at the end of the day, it's not my problem. It's a fight that's been going on for more than 1,000 years. There's nothing I can do about it personally. I can change what's in Canada, but I don't like that they're using a war that's going on over there that has nothing to do with us, has nothing to do with Canada. Outside of Mark Carney giving money,
agree.
and that's the part that bothers me.
I would agree it has nothing to do with Canada insofar as it's not our war, and we need to end that war. But we have a lot of politicians who are bought and paid for by Israel in the US and Canada. So it does affect us in that way. I wish I could say it has no effect at all, but it does have a huge effect, especially on Republican congressmen and women and Republican senators, as well as Democrats in the States. Not so much in Canada, but to some degree. But I would agree, focus has to be, and this is why I say I work with Muslims in Canada. We don't talk about Gaza. We don't talk about Israel. We don't talk about Palestine. We talk about the LGBTQ agenda and what we need to do to fight it and to stop it from corrupting our youth and our children. And they are just as concerned about that as I am as a Christian. And that's where I find a common ground with them.
And I get it. That part I understand, and it's always if you look at what's going on in the West, especially in Europe, this is how they became so popular. That's how they became how so many Muslims ended up in Europe, and now they're changing the political sphere, is because the left accepted them under the inclusion, but they don't talk about it. The average Muslims does not go out there and talk against the woke ideology. Some of them do, obviously, because it's pretty clear that it doesn't align with their religion. It's pretty damn clear that what the woke believe in don't align with it. But yet The woke defend them, and they're taking advantage of that situation. It's just I don't want what's happening in the UK, what's happening in France to happen here. At the end of the day,
Yeah.
I want immigrants that come here that will understand that this place was built on Judeo-Christian values, and that's why the West was so renowned for being the best place in the world. Canada and the US, arguably 10, 15 years ago, would have been the two main places everybody wanted to come to. Why? Because of our values. Yet we're seeing that being decimated left, right, and center. And you have to agree with me that there is a two-tier policing in Canada when you and I as Christians are not being treated the same as Muslims when it comes to the
Well,
law.
absolutely. And I've been talking about that for the last couple of weeks because of the experience Sean Foyt had when he
Yep.
came to Canada. And I was on
Yep,
the
good
air every
point.
day supporting that because Christians don't have any rights in this country anymore. But I think the problem is with immigration is we don't know what Canadian values are anymore. When people come to Canada, they should be told, here's what we believe in. And Harper was getting to that. Stephen Harper was getting back to that. And when Jason Kenney was immigration minister, they were actually reintroducing the dogma of what a Canadian is. What does Canadian believe? And they were talking about Judeo-Christian heritage. They were talking about democratic values. They were talking about the Magna Carta from Britain, freedom of speech, and all of these things. But one thing we do have in Canada, and I defend with my life, is freedom of religion. I think you have a right to worship God as you please. And I think you have a right to be whatever religion you want, as long as you don't impose that religion on the rest of society in an adverse or negative way that's going to impact people or impact their lives. And that's the difference. That's where Western values dictate that you can believe in God as you will, you can practice your faith, but don't push it on other people. Don't insist anyone believe your way. You can proselytize, you can share your faith, you're free to share the gospel as a Christian. Muslims can share the Quran, Jews can share their faith. But it never should come to a point where people feel threatened. And that's what these protests are making people feel. They have crossed the line. And I think a large part of it, though, has been the leftist Antifa element in these protests. But I agree with you. You give people a double standard, they will take advantage of it. And I say equality under the law. And for me, that covers all faiths, all religions, and all identity politics. Stop having two or three tiered systems, whether it's Aboriginal or whether it's Muslims or whether it's the LGBTQ community. Stop
That's a
treating
religion
people
too.
differently. Let's have one rule for all Canadians as Canadian citizens, regardless of your race, your religion, your ethnicity, or your country of origin. We're all here together, but we're all equal under the law. And as soon as we get away from that, I'm a huge disciple of Ayn Rand. And when she said the difference between collective rights and individual rights is that collective rights are tribalism. When you view people as a tribe, as a collective with different needs, different values, and different rights than you have. So what you end up with is competing tribes in a society, and it's chaos, and nobody ends up having any rights because you're constantly fighting over diminishing rights. And who ends up with all of the power is the government and the state. And this is why I'm 100% behind an idea, a Canada where everybody is equal and there's no race-based hunting, fishing, judicial system. And Muslims in the street protesting are treated the same way as Christians in the street. And I'm sick, and as you said, I'm tired of police enforcing the law in a two-tiered manner. But that's because the government pushes identity politics, even when the government doesn't realize that the Muslims that they're pushing don't like them at all. This is the irony of this whole thing, is that they're literally giving advantages and special privileges to groups that don't really like them at all or don't even support their policies because they think there's political advantage in it. And this is how crazy, how this country's become a madhouse. It's a lunatic asylum where nobody really has any individual rights anymore. We have been carved up into so many collectives that we don't know where rights begin and end anymore.
It's what happens when you have the patients running the asylum.
That's it.
The one of the things that's been coming up more and more, at least in my opinion, has been really a sore point, at least for me, is what does it mean to be Canadian? Because you mentioned it that Trudeau talked about it almost 8 years ago, saying that we had no identity. Now you look at where most of our immigration is coming from, which 45-ish% from India. They don't have the same values that we have. So what does it mean as somebody that was born here? You're older than I am, so you're the generation before me. What does it mean to you to be Canadian? And I ask the same question to the people in the comment section. I want to know, what do you guys think it means today to be Canadian?
Well, what does it mean today to be Canadian? I'm completely out of
Or what
sync.
does it mean to you
What
today,
does it
as
mean
in
to me?
right now? What does it mean to
I
you? Yep.
I go back to the 1962 Bill of Rights, authored by then Prime Minister John Diefenbaker. And I'm not, Diefenbaker had good things and bad things about Diefenbaker, but his Bill of Rights was probably the finest thing he ever introduced to Canadian society. And it articulates what a Canadian is in a way that the Charter of Rights doesn't. The Charter of Rights is there, and yes, I'm not saying the Charter of Rights is of no use and we should submerge it someplace. The Charter of Rights is very vague on some very important principles. Property rights isn't even in the Constitution or the Charter of Rights, which is a huge mistake. But in the Bill of Rights, it clearly outlines what a Canadian is. A Canadian is a free person, an individual who is free to think, free to believe, free to practice their religion and their faith as they please, but most of all is free to speak their mind. And this goes back centuries to our Commonwealth heritage, to our heritage in the British Empire, where even the most common Englishman was allowed to speak badly about the king or queen because he had the right to free speech. And as lowly as he could be, he still had that right. I believe in a Canada where the individual is paramount. I believe in a Canada where the state is limited in its power of extortion and its power to subvert our lives in the democratic process. I believe we have a right to vote, and I believe in a free press. These are all things that have been taken for granted in Canada, that don't exist in some parts of the world, that don't exist in dictatorships, and that won't exist in Canada if we continue along the line that Mark Carney and Justin Trudeau and others have been taking us. And if we don't have an immigration policy that buttresses Canadian identity as we've always understood it. I don't know if it's too late, but we do need to be very selective in our immigration. Mass migration is completely corrosive, it's completely toxic to a country. And as you pointed out, Europe is suffering the consequences of that. Europe might be beyond repair, beyond
Mhm.
redemption. I don't know if the United States just went through mass illegal immigration under Joe Biden. It has shaken that country to the foundation, but I think it still has the resolve to fight back. This is what Make America Great Again is all about. What does it mean to be an American? Well, go back to the Bill of Rights, go back to the Constitution, go back to the founding fathers. That's what America is all about. In Canada, go back to what Confederation was all about in 1867, because we have moved so far from that. I don't know if Canada is beyond redemption, because we have literally poured millions of people into this country at a rate faster than we can accommodate them and we can absorb them. I still see hope for the US. I don't see much hope for Canada, because my view of Canada is not shared by a lot of people who have just come to this country, and they say, "What's in it for me? How
Yeah.
am I going to get rich here overnight?" And that's how they see democracy. They see democracy as meaning I'm going to be rich very soon, and that's not democracy. That is corruption.
You know, I've been putting a lot of thought into it, and free speech, freedom of religion, gun rights, charity. This is something that we're known for. Even our blue helmets, right? That's what we did. We went to around the world to help people. But you know, one thing that people seem to forget about, which to me used to be the number one thing about what it meant to be Canadian, tough as nails. 450 years ago, when we came from Europe with nothing and had to survive one of the hardest temperatures in the world. Most people don't know that, but Canada is top four, with places like Siberia with the highest switch, like the biggest switch in temperature from the minus to the hotter. So we
Yeah,
came from Europe, built a life here with nothing while fighting animals the size of bears, living in small little cabins at minus 40 outside. So to me, that's what it means to be Canadian. That's why we have a lot of social services, because it's in our blood to take care of other people, because we know that we can't survive these type of harsh temperatures by ourselves. We need to be with other people. And unfortunately, what it means to be Canadian has been taken advantage of. As Dr. Watley said a few weeks ago on one of my episodes, he said that you cannot be a welfare state and have open borders. You can only be one of the two, and unfortunately, this is what we are. We are a welfare state. We are a state that takes care of its people with open policies, open border policies, where people, as you mentioned, they come here not how can I make Canada better, but how can I use Canada to make myself better. And unfortunately, this is what people are taking advantage of. They're taking advantage of us being kind, us wanting freedom of speech, wanting freedom of religion. But at the same time, we need to remember that we're tough as nails, and we do need to stand up when our rights are being eroded, like what's going on right now. Because there's no way we would have survived this environment if we weren't tough. There's no way. Like we did. Can you imagine 450? My family came here about 400 ish years ago. I can't even imagine what they've gone through in order to just survive. We need to go back to a time where we are tough again. And like one of the comments is one of my buddies that's in there. He's saying that to him, Canada is like 1985. I was born in 1982, and as well, to me, Canada in the 80s is what being Canadian was all about. So yeah,
well,
I will agree with you that I don't know if it's too late or not. I do ponder this question every single day of my life. If it's too late, or is it still a possibility to
I
bring
re- I,
back
re-
Canada?
I remember watching a National Film Board production when I was in junior high, I think. And it was all about how immigrants settled the West and how they had to go through these horrible winters, cold winters. They had to farm the land. They had to literally break the land before if it didn't break them. And my father was part of that group. His father, who came over to Canada to settle in the West, to create the farmland, to create the agriculture. My father was born just outside of Saskatoon. And I thought about that film the other day and I'm thinking, would the National Film Board even conceive of doing such a project today that talked about these immigrants from Western Europe? Yeah, they were all white who came to Canada and settled in the Western provinces. Some of them weren't even provinces yet, who established farmland, who established civilization in the West. Would the National Film Board even think about doing something like that today to celebrate that as great Canadian? No, they would do a film about lesbian mothers. And that's exactly what they do today. They obsess about sexuality. They obsess about things that most people don't really even want to think about. They don't celebrate real history and real Canadians, and they haven't for years. And the NFB and the CBC are emblematic of the institutions in this country that have gone downhill along with Canada itself. And you just reminded me of that film because it would not be made today.
You're welcome. I'm just you're welcome. But it is true that unfortunately it's not the case anymore. And I do believe that after spending a lot of my time in the US, I think the biggest difference between us and them is that they did win their war of independence. So a lot of the South is not complacent the way that we are here in Canada. And I think that's our biggest flaw. We're no longer tough and we're very, very complacent, as in, I can't be bothered by what's going on. I have other things to do. I'm just going to take care of myself and let it be. And this is the reason why we are in the situation that we find ourselves today. We have about 10 minutes left, and you wanted to talk about something that I'm going to talk about on my podcast right after this. You wanted to talk about the NDP leadership candidates being told that only half of the 500 signatures of support they received or they're going to receive can be cis males.
Yeah, I had to look that up again because I couldn't remember what the hell's a cisgender male. Oh, it's a normal guy who's not under some delusion that he's really a female. Okay, yeah, it's a biological male who knows he's a biological male. Okay. Yeah, there never used to be any question about that. But this is such rank insanity. I've never seen anything like this from a political party. So you've got 250 of your 500, 50% of the people signing your nomination form have to be essentially transgender of one form or another. I don't even know if you can find that many people to sign your membership. This is so stupid. And how are you going to verify it? Beyond it being idiotic and beyond it being a flagrant violation of basic human rights. Like I don't have the same rights as somebody who's transgender now because I'm sorry, you can only be 50%. The other 50% have to be, people who accept the creed. If you don't accept the creed, well, you're only half a vote. You're only half, and what is it? 100 of them have to be associated with the LGBTQ agenda or people with disabilities or something else. And this is just identity politics gone mad. It's even one step beyond what the liberals have ever presented in identity politics. And I've never seen anything quite so stupid from a political party. They deserve to be in political oblivion for the rest of eternity. The NDP is a party of half-wits now. They're a party of moral cowards. They're a party of degenerates. They're a party that can't even think their way out of a paper bag. They couldn't even do a potty detail. These people are so stupid. They are so obsessed with non-entities, with so obsessed with nonsense that they don't deserve to have a seat on a city council anywhere in this country. These people are beyond reason. These are the lunatics who are in charge of the asylum. God help us if they're ever in charge of any kind of federal government. I just hope this doesn't leak any further into the governments they already do have in this country. I think the NDP should be extinct from Canadian politics. This is the last straw for me. From a party that used to at least understand that working class people had needs, and these needs had nothing to do with what the NDP is now wallowing in. And to me, this is emblematic of the decline of not just Canada, but Western civilization.
I think it's funny because what do you expect? Mark Carney is saying that, or Mark's Carney is saying that Pride is no longer for 1 month, is for every day of the year. And the NDP is left of Mark's Carney. So they have to be saying the dumbest thing ever in order to be woker than Mark Carney. So this to me is not surprising. But correct me if I'm wrong, they didn't have enough seats. They fell short like 12 seats to keep their official status, right? So at
That's
the end of
right.
the day, they're dead. They're dead. Like the party cannot survive without their official status. And this is what I'm trying to find. I can't find how much money they actually received per
They
year because
were,
it's in the millions, right? It's in the
oh yeah,
millions for sure.
they're down to 7 seats. They're not they don't have official party status, so they don't get government funding for research for any additional staff. The MPs, as MPs, are funded for staff, but the party itself does not receive any government funding. So yeah, they're basically just sitting around doing nothing. And even the current, interim NDP leader said, "Well, maybe this is not such a good idea." Don Davies says, maybe we lost so many seats because we're obsessed with identity politics, and maybe it's not a good idea to push it any further. But of course, that won't go over well with the woke, the increasingly diminishing population of NDP members who are now completely obsessed with navel gazing and everything else. So it's a poetic moment for me when I saw this. It just I would love to see the NDP just to completely be finished because they've done it to themselves. And God knows they don't have anything on their mind that remotely resembles what a blue collar worker is thinking about at the end
Oh
of
no.
the day.
But which really, like in all seriousness, if the NDP dies, the Green is useless, the NDP is useless, PPC has no power. So you end up with a two-party system like in the US, but as we saw in the last election, there's not much difference between the conservative and the liberal. So we do end up with a uniparty, like I've been calling it for years. So at the end of the day, Canada is on the brinks of a uniparty. So what's worth? Why are we still voting?
Well, I can only hope that we have some principled conservative breakthrough in that two-party system. I'm not entirely optimistic about that, and I have tended to say that the uniparty is increasingly a reality. But I'm always hopeful we can resurrect something that is better and truer to the conservative aim. And unlike you, I'm not prepared to throw out the Conservative Party candidate. I criticize it every day. And but and I think I saw Pierre Poilievre this week talk about the stand on guard law. And I thought, hey, he's watching my show because that's the name of my show, Stand on Guard. And I thought, yeah, he might watch it. And I've tried several times to get Polly up on the show, and it's all been, oh, we can't do it right now. But I think the reason is I'm not a propagandist. So, but I'm going to keep trying because, as I said, I've known Pierre Polyev for over 21 years, and I think there occasionally I do have some good things to say about him. I'm glad he finally came out with the Castle Law and to say that, yeah, we can't, it's kind of unacceptable that Canadians get beaten up, have crossbows shoved in their faces, and yet they get charged for it. Finally, we see these little bursts of common sense once in a while, and I guess that keeps me interested and it keeps me hopeful. But I see myself as more useful as a critic, and in the continuing to say, hey, keep it going. Because Ezra Levant told me this. I don't know if I ever mentioned this on the show. He told me this years ago that if conservative journalists, conservative commentators don't push the Conservative Party from the right, it will inevitably drift to the left. So stop being a propagandist. Stop clapping and applauding every time they say everything. And this is my problem, Nico, with so many podcasts, broadcasts on YouTube and Rumble, especially in Canada. They are nothing but lackeys for the Conservative Party. They just
Yep.
constantly have to cheerlead. And no, we are not going to say anything negative about Pierre, who they act like they know and they don't even know him from Adam, or the Conservative Party, because we are propaganda organs and we're hoping to get the approval of the establishment. And we're not going to criticize. We're just going to applaud everything they do. These people should find another place to work. because they're not journalists and they're not even able commentators. You've got to view the whole situation and not be in anybody's pocket. And this is why I say my fear is that YouTube and social media is becoming exactly what the mainstream media was
Yep,
and what
100%.
print media was in the 19th century. It's aligned with a political party, and you want the news, we're going to give you the conservative news, we're going to give you the liberal news, but don't think we're ever going to criticize our side because our side's always right. That is an echo chamber, and that's not what we need. And this is why I'm on your show, Nico, because we're not afraid to cross that line. We're not
No.
afraid to say, "Oh, maybe he shouldn't have said that." maybe, maybe Polyev was a little late getting to that one. And you've got to have honesty and some objectivity in journalism. And a lot of these idiots out there right now who think they're doing it the right way haven't got a clue in hell about what a journalist is, what a reporter is, or even what a commentator is supposed to be. They're immature, they lack experience, and they don't know what they're doing. And I think this is one reason I'm supporting what you're doing, Nico, because I think you want to break out of that.
Yes, that's exactly why we're recording together. That's why right now I'm going to go on another podcast with a liberal. And, the conservative hates me as much as the liberal do. I've recorded content with some of the biggest names in Canada and the US, and the people in Canada now don't talk to me anymore. And I'm talking about conservatives because they didn't like the fact that I question Pierre Poilievre on a daily basis, calling him a very weak leader. Very, very weak leader. So we need to talk about this more because I agree with you. What we're seeing on YouTube, on X, on Instagram, they're becoming the new mainstream media and they're 100% aligned with parties. So let's talk about this next week because we have to finish the show right now. I want to thank you as always. It's always a great conversation, but we'll bring that back because I think this is a must subject we need to cover because that's the whole point of you sitting down is to be able to try to shape where conservatism in Canada should be going.
Amen. Thanks for your time tonight. I know you got to go. Bye for now.
Thank you, David. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.